Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video I thought I'd talk about the cost of living crisis. Now this is a very energetic topic at the moment, excuse the bad pun there. Lots of people are talking about the cost of living crisis. There's lots of news, lots of talking heads and lots of opinions on the matter. And no doubt lots of people are feeling very stressed, frustrated and worried about the impact, particularly that rising food prices and rising energy prices will have on them. Now I don't want to talk about the political aspects in this video, maybe I will in another video. But in this video I want to focus on the fact that people are feeling stressed and frustrated and helpless. And I want to break things down in the way that a negotiator would. So I'm going to explain this issue from a negotiation perspective. In essence, how a negotiator thinks when a negotiator is not himself or herself stressed, tired, drunk or otherwise intoxicated. So for anyone new to this channel, I am the collaborative negotiator, professional negotiator of over 10 years of experience, and I teach people how to negotiate in a whole range of difficult, big and stressful scenarios. So this is a typical sort of thing that I would focus on and use to explain to people how they would tackle problems. So let's keep this simple and let's start with the ability of the individual, because this is the thing that is most easy for people to understand. Now, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to assume that you're not, the Prime Minister, head of an energy company, or any other individual like that. Because if you are that sort of individual, then you have a lot of influencing ability. You can direct or shape the cost of living crisis. You can make certain decisions. You can direct other people to do certain things. But as a normal individual, those options are not available to you. And so you kind of have to realize that. So that means that the next important thing, second to influencing ability, is wealth. Now I'm not talking extravagant amounts of wealth, although needless to say, if you are extremely rich, then you're not really going to be suffering any kind of cost of living crisis. What I mean by wealth is any individual who has a reasonable level of income and a reasonable level of cash at their disposal. And the reason why that is important is because that allows you to make individual decisions that you can use to influence things, to help improve the effects that you might be experiencing from all the price rises. So what does that mean? So why does wealth matter in this context? Because as an individual, you can decide what is best for you. What is the best decision that you can make to reduce the impact of the price rises? So what I mean by that is that you might decide to modernize your house. You might put solar panels on, put a battery in the house, for example, because you've done the long-term calculation and you know that over a period of say between 10 to 20 years, that payment will pay back. And then from that point onwards, you'll be having near free, electricity energy, for example. You can do cheaper things. You might decide to install a log burner and to go and source wood for yourself to cut down your bills. You might decide to buy an electric vehicle, again for similar reasons why you buy solar panels for the house. What all these decisions have in common is that you have to put money up front. So you have to think of a solution to a particular problem and you have to apply your own wealth towards solving or to implementing that solution. And that is why wealth matters very significantly from an individual negotiation perspective. You simply have more options. You can go and negotiate better deals. You can go and negotiate projects with tradesmen, for example, when fitting improvement to your house, whatever they may be. So what this also means is that as an individual, you are making these decisions and they have the most impact on you yourself. And the reason why that happens is because you have control. You have your wealth, your position, the time that you have, the intelligence, whatever other resources that are available to you can be utilized to control events around you. Whether that's the house you live in, the car that you drive, and the people that work for you, anything like that. So the key when it comes to individual negotiation is about control, the key thing. You're thinking about what it is you can do, what it is you can ask people to do, what it is you can put your money towards that benefit you. So when it comes to a cost of living crisis, you have lots of options. You can't, for example, just tell the energy company to reduce your bills. Your wealth doesn't go that far. And even if you're a particularly rich individual, I would argue your wealth still doesn't go that far. But what you can do is take steps to cut that energy company out of your life as much as possible. And that means thinking about different things that you can do, particularly on house improvements, for example. Now, of course, when it comes to food, for example, and again, the wealth is a little bit synonymous with time here, because you still need food. You can shop around a bit more, try and get better deals, but you can also do other things, like buy some land, a plot, do some gardening, grow your own fruit and vegetables. So that is not just about wealth, but that's about time as well. And again, you as the individual can make that decision to devote your time to doing that, to tackling the cost of living crisis issue that may be having some impact on you. So it's important to think of these things as control, an element of individual decision making. What is it can you do to help improve your situation? And a lot of people don't do that. They look at the news headlines and get a little bit paralyzed perhaps by the negativity of the news, and they think, oh, there's nothing I can do. Well, the reality is there are quite a few things you can do. Of course, if you're not a rich individual, if you're working extremely long hours in a difficult job, then your options are more limited, and I'll come on to that for a bit. But as an individual with resources, you should think about how to apply them to improve your situation if you don't want to continue to sit around feeling stressed and frustrated at all these cost rises that you seem to have no control over. But of course, individual control can only go so far. You can't control everything. You can't influence external events. So when it comes to trying to control things more widely, then this is where you enter into the territory of collective negotiation. Now there's a bit of a perverse thing here, because you're trying to exert more control on external organizations or factors, but in doing so, you have less individual control. And this is because you're no longer making decisions that just benefit you. You're no longer controlling things that only impact on you. You now need to figure out how to work with others, and others need to work and agree with you. So what that means is you all sacrifice control, but you do so because you want key things. And those key things are numbers, in a way, and influencing ability that comes with numbers. So, let's take an energy company as a classic example. Energy company jacks the bills up 50%, and individually, you can complain all you want, you can't change that. But if every single customer of that energy company leaves, then that is collective action. It may not be organized, it may not even be communicating with each other. But if everybody makes that decision, you immediately create that impact on the company. Now, of course, one of the significant issues in the current climate is you don't have that option. You cannot collectively leave the energy company because there aren't actually any better options out there. They are all equally stuck with having to increase their prices rather significantly. So even as a group in that scenario, that is not an option that you have available. So if you were to get together with a group of like-minded individuals, and you were to say, for example, how do we get away from this energy company, then you need to think about different things as a group that you can do or invest in. Could that be some kind of community energy project? Could that be lobbying local or central governments? Could that even be civil disobedience? These are all things that rely on collective action, that rely on a large number of people to agree that is what they need to do to effect change. So numbers matter very significantly, but for those numbers to matter, everybody needs to be cohesive. And this is where I come to the biggest failure in any collective negotiation, usually. And there are two big failures. One is lack of cohesion. People don't agree. You might not agree on the same policy objectives, for example. And if you don't have that agreement, that alignment in goals, then it's very hard to genuinely act collectively. The second thing is very hard to do, even if you do agree, is to be very well organized. People need to give a certain commitment to that collective effort, shall we say. And to do that, they have to be invested in it. They have to buy into the goal. They have to buy into the need to invest their time or money or whatever it is. For that to happen, somebody, or somebody's plural, need to do a lot of organisation, to put a lot of effort into organising people, into achieving that and maintaining that cohesion. And you need to do it at scale. And that is critical, because if you want to influence governments or organisations, the numbers is usually what have, but they will play you off against each other. If one group have slightly different goals than the others, then they can be split off. They can be negotiated with as individuals or smaller numbers in order to undermine the group effort. So you have to remember that. So what you have to remember is that this approach has the least individual impact in terms of time, in terms of ability to effect immediate change. But what it does do, if you can achieve the goal of getting numbers, of getting cohesion and organisation, this is the option that gives you the most amount of scope for effecting longer term changes. This is what being in the union is about. This is what being part of a political party is about. It's creating numbers in order to have a collective negotiation position. And the cost of energy crisis is no different from that. And part of the reason why no solutions are being driven forward is because there's no proper collective view or people that will cohere around a set of policies, a set of strategies to effect change. And I'm not advocating anything illegal, but at the end of the day, several million people in the UK decided they weren't going to pay their energy bills, or they were going to blockade an energy company. That would hugely impact what would happen next. Not necessarily positively, but it would certainly have an impact. But the trick, of course, is you can never get everyone to agree to do any particular course of action. So being organised and getting agreement is crucial. So what are the other things we should think about? What should you think about when looking at this cost of living crisis as an individual? Well, you kind of have three options, really. One is you accept the status quo. You accept the current status. And to be honest, going on to YouTube, going on to the news or whatever, and saying how awful the cost of living crisis is and how dreadful the government is, and whilst that may all be true, it doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't change anything, whether for you or whether it's a collective. So what you're doing when you're reading the news, when you're moaning, is you're accepting the status. The other thing you can do is make your individual choices. And I've spoken about that. You make individual decisions that will improve your situation. And that's something that only you can do. And of course, the third option, which I also talked about, is to contribute in some way to some kind of collective effort, whether that's a community scheme, whether that's charity-based, local government, central government, politics, whatever it may be. There's various options, but do you have the desire to pursue those options? Is that question you need to ask yourself. And so if you are going to ask yourself whether to pursue any of those options, you also need to understand your limitations. Because there are crucial limitations. They're not always insolvable, but they do exist, and you do have to have a plan for dealing with them. So the first obvious one is money. If you, or collectively you plural, don't have money, then your options are by necessity quite limited. So you couldn't do, for example, a community scheme of buying, or building an entire wind farm to power your village, for example, if you don't have rather a lot of money to fund that. The other thing is time. Perhaps you can do some campaigning. Perhaps you can lobby or protest or whatever, but that all takes time. And even if you want to organise to, petition for things, that again takes time. So you need to understand that, understand if you and all the others that you want involved have the time available, and if not, can you make the time available? And of course, there's organisation. And people who understand these things know that organisation is perhaps the most important thing to achieving anything, whether individual or collective level. You need to be able to organise the sequence of events that gets you from where you are now to where you want to be. And of course, all of that can drive an influencing ability. As an individual, unless you're particularly wealthy or powerful, you don't have much influencing ability. But you can have some at local level, if you choose to apply it. If you have particular skills, are particularly persuasive, for example. On the other hand, you may decide to be part of an organisation that does have that influencing ability. And if you have some money, but you don't have a lot of time at all, then your decision may be that you will contribute financially to that organisation to influence on your behalf. That is a conscious decision you should make in order to recognise the limitation that you're operating within. So my final thoughts on this matter. Everyone's going to be feeling stressed and pressured as a result of seeing their bills climbing quite dramatically. It's going to make you unhappy, it's going to make you angry and frustrated. One of the dangers of having those emotions, and they are strong, legitimate emotions, is that they can create a sense of paralysis. And this is something that can also happen in the negotiation side of things. Negotiations tend to be very pressured. They tend to be quite stressful. There's a huge amount of detail to go through, and sometimes the job can just look so big and insolvable. So what you need to do in that scenario, and this perhaps applies to the personal life as much as it does to anyone involved in negotiation, is that you need to recognise when you are feeling stressed and pressured, and you're feeling the effects of the burden that's been placed upon you. And when that happens, you need to make the decision that you're going to slow things down, take a step back, and start thinking. What I'm saying in this video is not particularly clever, it's not anything special. These are just basic, simple negotiation principles. And it's very easy to forget them in the heat of the moment. But one thing I find incredibly valuable is that if I take a moment to settle down a little bit and think my way through the problem as calmly as possible. So if you're facing these issues on the cost of living crisis, and that's the first thing you need to do, settle yourself down, think through the problem. And when you're thinking through the problem, what you want to do is analyse what you can and cannot control. What is it that you can do to improve your position? Now, I know many people will say, well, there's nothing I can do. And in many cases, that might even be true. You may have very little money, absolutely no available time, and your options can be extremely limited. But if you're willing to sit down and think through the problem, then there are actually a few things you can do. Whether you want to do them might be a different question. But there are, as long as you have a certain number of resources, whether that's intelligence or money or whatever, then there are things you can do if you choose to do them. And if you do make a decision that you want to take a particular course of action, whether that be home improvement, unionisation or whatever, then you should make a plan, a strategy for what it is you're going to do and what you're going to get out of it. So think about the things you want to say to people, the things you want to influence, the objectives you want them to achieve for you or for all of you collectively. And then you need to go ahead and implement that strategy. And when you're implementing the strategy as well, don't get so tunnel visioned that you forget again to take breath breaks, to step back and review progress. Check everything is going well, and if not, make adjustments. And again, it's very easy for people to forget to do this when they're in the middle of a big and complicated task. Now I hope all these basic guidance and principles and things are helpful to anyone thinking about this problem. This is going to create a lot of stress and pressure on people. I've talked about that a lot in this video, but it's important to recognize that. And it's important to recognize when it is impacting upon you as the individual. Because one of the key things that makes people stressed and frustrated and very depressed even is that lack of control, that feeling of not being able to control things. So when you're able to have a methodology where you look at any given problem and think of various ways that you can improve the situation or control or find out what is within your control and use that in order to improve your situation, then you've got a purpose, you've got something to do, and things don't look quite so bad at that particular point. So I hope this video is helpful to people. Nothing particularly complicated or exciting, but hopefully helpful nonetheless. So if you do like this video and this content, please do comment in the box below and like and subscribe.